They thought Earth was a graveyard. They never asked who buried the last invaders. When the Imperial fleet arrived, there were no cities left to burn. The once blue marble turned bone white under clouds of chemical ice, her seas frozen into plains of shattered glass. But beneath that silent crust, the last children of humanity waited, not with prayers, but with teeth. Elara Kent stood in the belly of Outpost Argo, half a mile beneath the Arctic shelf. Her breath fogged the recycled air as she stared at the rusted doors that led deeper into the cold tomb that once was Earth's heart. She wore the black fatigues of the Polar Resistance, a uniform stitched from old mining suits and armored plates ripped from abandoned orbital wrecks. Beside her flickered the last working holofeed, a ghostly image of the Imperial Armada bleeding into orbit like a steel storm. Hundreds of dreadnoughts, hulls etched with the sigils of 1,000 conquered worlds, encircled Earth like vultures over a corpse. A static voice broke the silence. "Commander Ken," rasped Idris Harlan through the calm line. Voice cracked. From radiation scars, they're broadcasting surrender protocols. Same lies as Centauri Prime. Same as Titan. Elara didn't answer. She touched the pitted wall beside her, a memorial carved with the names of the Soul Guard, the last fleet that had failed to hold Luna's gate a decade ago. Her father's name was there. Her mother's too. Humanity was down to the bone now. No fleets, no cities. Just bunkers, memory, and an old secret buried deeper than the ice. She turned to Idris as he limped closer, a man stitched together by shrapnel and stubborn hope. "They'll land within the hour," Idris said. "You think they'll dig for U.S.?" Elara's eyes never left the feed. "They'll find us. They always do." A tremor rippled through the floor as the first atmospheric descent pods burned through the stratosphere. The walls moaned like an old ship at sea. Idris watched her carefully. "What's left to do, Elara? We can't hold a stand. The children, the sick, we can't hide them forever. We can't run." Elara didn't blink. She reached into the folds of her collar and pulled out an ancient brass key, its teeth worn smooth by generations of hands. "We don't run," she said. "We open the vault." Idris recoiled, his one good eye flicked to the rusted doors behind her. "Sealed since the final exodus from the surface. We swore we'd never touch that place again. It's a grave." Elara turned, pressing her palm against the cold lock. The ancient mechanisms hummed for the first time in 40 years. "Not today," she said. "Today. It's a promise." Above them, the Imperial fleet shrouded Earth in a curtain of metal and fire. Soldiers born under distant suns loaded plasma, carbines and breech drills, certain their new prize would surrender like all the others. They never wondered why Earth was quiet. Deep in the ice, the vault doors groaned. Frost cracked and fell like old snow. The dead corridors beyond flickered to life, humming with lights last seen by the engineers who buried the final safeguard. Beneath the dying world, Idris stepped back as stale air poured out, carrying the ghosts of an older war. "Elara," he whispered, "what have we done?" Elara's eyes glowed with a light older than her. "What we were meant to do, survive, by remembering how to be monsters." A dull alarm began to echo through the tunnels, a heartbeat beneath the frost. The children of the bunkers stirred in their bunks, their parents gathering them close. Old warriors like Idris checked rusted weapons that hadn't fired in decades. Elara turned one last time to the flickering holofeed. One dreadnought, larger than a city, drifted into view, its weapons spun lazily, ready to erase the last embers of Earth. "Come find us," she whispered, "and meet what you made us." Then she stepped into the vault's darkness. Asterisk, the Imperial fleet's first boots hit the ice at dawn. A sun long hidden behind clouds of poison mist broke for a moment, scattering diamond light across the frozen wastes. Dropships cracked through the storms like falling knives, landing with seismic force. Lord Commander Varen Cell stepped from the lead vessel, armored in living steel that writhed with Imperial sigils. He had never set foot on a world that had not bent the knee by dusk. Earth, they told him, would be no different, an ancient ruin, right for stripping. Behind him, lines of clone shock troopers marched through the snow in perfect formation, black banners snapping in the chemical wind. Scouting drones hummed overhead, sweeping the endless white for heat signatures, signs of movement, hope of resistance. There was none. To Verum, it was confirmation. Humanity's last bastion was nothing but a myth whispered among conquered worlds. To make the children of slaves dream, he turned to his second, a thin creature bred for logistics and obedience. Its mandibles clicked as it hovered by his side. They hide in old tunnels, The creature rasped, scattered, malnourished. No fleet, no guns, no threat. Veruin's eyes, cold and golden, scanned the horizon. Find them, drag them to the light. The Empress wants a lesson carved into the stars. Earth's final whimper. Elsewhere, miles beneath Veruin's boots, the old vault doors wheezed fully open. Alara Ken stepped inside, the stale air carrying whispers of old dread. The chamber beyond was carved into the bones of the world, a cathedral of steel, humming, with secrets never meant to wake again. Idris Harlan followed, his breath shallow. Rusted signs flaked from the walls. Project Thule, authorized access only. Warnings in dead languages. Alara, what did they bury here? Idris asked. Voice a hush swallowed by the humming dark. She didn't answer at first. Instead, she keyed. A console with trembling fingers. Ancient lights flared, pale veins running through walls thick enough to withstand 1,000 orbital strikes. She turned to him then, her face half-lit by the flickering green glow. Our final refusal, Idris. Eyes widened as he read the old schematics, the warnings, the coded names etched in flickering text. Chronos Protocol, Helios Spear, Neural Echo Defense Grid. We swore, Idris croaked. No more weapons like this. Not after the last night. Alara's voice was cold iron. Swearing didn't keep them away, Idris. Surrender didn't keep them away. Running didn't keep them away. She pressed her palm flat against the main conduit. It pulsed under her skin. This will. Above them, Veruin's forces scoured the old surface stations. The troopers moved like a single mind, cracking open sealed bunkers only to find frozen beds. Empty canisters, memories turned to frost. Each discovery frustrated Veruin. He watched from a raised platform, wind whipping at his ceremonial cloak. Where are they? He growled to his logistics drone. Deep, beneath the crust, the creature chittered. Our scans show tunnels, deep heat signatures, but the ice disrupts clear mapping. Veruin sneered. Then break the crust. Orbital artillery batteries aligned in low orbit, their barrels glimmering like stars gone mad. The command rippled. Through encrypted channels, a rain of fire to shake out the vermin inside the vault. The old world came alive. Massive turbines coughed into motion. Lights flickered in vast hangars filled with long-forgotten shapes under dusty tarps. Alara moved through them like a ghost among titans, sleek drones shaped like obsidian sharks. Coils of rail cannons larger than city blocks, and in the center, the Helios Spear, a single, slender shard of metal, half buried in magnetic clamps. Its surface crawled with shifting runes of code, ancient, feral, and hungry. Idris caught her shoulder. We don't even know if it works anymore. It was unfinished. Tested once, on Luna. We lost half the moon's colonies. The fallout. Alara rounded on him, eyes burning, and yet here we are, Idris, half dead in our own grave. Would you rather they strip the marrow from our bones while we watch? A distant rumble shuddered through the vault. Dust rained down like ash. Veruin's bombardment had begun, the crust cracking, melting tunnels, collapsing. Our eyes closed his good eye for a heartbeat. He smelled scorched soil, heard his daughter's laughter before the storms took her. He opened that ruin of an eye and met Alara's gaze. Then we finish it, he said, no matter the cost. Together, they approached the control node. Alara laid the brass key in its slot. Ancient tech wedded the lost genius. The vault thrummed with new life. Red warning glyphs scrolled across the walls. Arming, arming, arming. Above them, the sky turned to fire. Imperial troops fell back to armored bunkers as molten ice sheets exploded. Steam towers rising miles into the frozen sky. Veruin watched from orbit, unflinching. He did not fear fire. He did not fear defiance. The Empire had crushed stars, erased species, rewritten the laws of entire worlds. A dying Earth would not break that chain. He leaned toward the holodable, his voice cold as the void. Begin surface penetration. Bring me their last den. When we stand in their bunker, when their children kneel, then burn the rest to glass. Deep beneath his boots, the spear woke, and with it, the promise that Earth would never kneel again. In the trembling dark of Earth's buried heart, the vault's ancient engines roared for the first time into generations. Steam hissed through conduits long frozen, and panels flickered alive, displaying lines of code that no one alive truly understood, except Alara Ken. She stood before the Helios Spear, eyes locked on the swirling patterns etched into its core. This was no ordinary weapon. It was a memory. a myth forged in the final days when Earth's last engineers turned desperation into madness. Beside her, Idris Harlan's battered fingers danced over a cracked console, bypassing burned circuits and ancient safeties. He muttered half-forgotten protocols like prayers dot above them. The ceiling rumbled as the Imperial bombardment continued, orbital hammers cracking the crust, tearing at the labyrinth of tunnels like claws on an old carcass. Yet, in that trembling dark, something new shivered awake, power grid holding at 40%. Idris rasped. Sweat dripped into the scarred hollows of his cheeks. If they keep pounding us, it'll drop. Alara didn't look at him. She was somewhere else, 20 years ago, holding her mother's hand as the last Resistance Council sealed these doors behind them. Her mother's voice was still clear. One day, if they ever come back, the dead will answer for us. Now the dead had spoken. It was Alara's voice they would carry. We're not firing yet, she said. We show them first. Remind them what Earth is. Idris laughed, a broken sound. You always did have a taste for theater, Ken. A new voice crackled through the static of the command net. Young, strained, but burning with the same stubborn fire. Mila Voss, a scout captain, barely 20, but with the eyes of someone twice her age. Commander Ken, we've got Imperial breach squads moving through Sector 7. They're cutting torch lines through the old hydro tunnels. How many? Hundreds. Heavies. Drones. They're bringing tunneling mechs to peel us open like fruit. Alara's fingers drummed the railing before her. She could almost hear her father's voice. The old admiral barking orders across lunar voids. They think they know how we fight. Remind them they taught us how to hate. Mila, she said, voice calm as the vault's humming heart. Pull your squad back to the second choke. Seal the tunnels behind you. Mila hesitated. And the children, the civvies? Alara turned, staring into Idris' lone eye. There was no soft mercy in either of them now. They know where to go, Alara said. Asterisk, asterisk, they'll make it to the vault. She toggled another channel, her voice rolling through the resistance frequencies like thunder through dry bone. All units, fall back to the spear perimeter. Bleed them every meter. Make them regret they ever cracked this ice. Far above, Lord Commander Varen watched fresh feed from his lead breach squad. Helmet cams flashing through twisting tunnels. Plasma torches hissing against armored bulkheads left by generations past. He leaned forward. Predator's smile, sharp beneath the mask. They run like rats, he said to his aide. Good, heard them deeper, where there is no escape. But he did not see what Alara saw. Deep in Sector 7, Mila Voss led her team, ragged fighters in patchwork armor, carrying weapons older than their parents. They laid traps where old mining rails crossed collapsed cargo shafts. They triggered rockfalls and blackened service tunnels. When the Imperial breach squads pushed forward, the ice fell on them like an avalanche, crushing the first wave in silence. The next squads advanced more carefully, drones humming ahead. But in the dark, human hands pulled the drones apart with magnet hooks and knives. It wasn't enough to stop them, but it slowed them. It made them bleed. And every drop of Imperial blood on Earth's poisoned soil was a spark in the frozen dark dot in the vault. Idris barked as more power surged through ancient pylons. Alara watched the Helios spear rise from its clamps. Its core cracked open like an eye waking from a long nightmare. Across the resistance calms, whispers became chants, scraps of old battle hymns. The Soul Guard's funeral odes reborn as defiance. They reached the ears of the invaders through intercepted frequencies, the sound of ghosts refusing to stay buried. Mila's voice hissed back through the vault's static. We're at the last choke, Commander. They're piling bodies to get through. Should we fall back? Alara's fingers tightened around her old rifle. No, she said. Hold them. Make them think we're cornered. Then run like hell when you see the light. Mila laughed. A sound too alive for this tomb. Copy that, Ken. I'll see you at the spearhead. Veru cell watched from orbit as his breach squads reported fierce, irrational resistance. No formal army, no chain of command like the Empire understood, just fury, dirt, and the haunting certainty that these half-starved ghosts would rather die than bow. He sneered, children playing with rocks. He told his aide, soon they'll kneel. He did not see the old satellites blinking awake above him, relics repurposed by human desperation. He did not feel the vault's cold hum as the spear aligned its internal magnetic rails with Earth's crust, drawing power from the last reserves buried beneath dead oceans. He did not hear Alara Ken's final whisper as she keyed the command. Sequence, let them come, she said, Let them stand above us, so the stars will watch them burn. The tunnel shook with a fury not felt since Earth's last nuclear storms. Imperial breach squads pressed deeper, their armored mechs cutting through steel bulkheads like knives through rotted bark. What they didn't understand was that every meter gain cost them more than they could count, and every drop of oil and blood fed something far older than any of their maps. Mila Voss crouched behind a collapsed tram car, her breath coming in ragged clouds. The last of her squad, 6 fighters in battered exo harnesses, braced beside her, their makeshift rifles humming with jury-rigged capacitors. They'd held the choke for 10 minutes longer than any sane tactician would allow, but this wasn't sane. This was Earth dot through a cracked viewport in the tram's rusted flank. She watched Imperial heavies lumber forward, silhouettes of metal giants, their plasma cutters searing the frost off the tunnel walls. The air smelled of scorched steel and burned men. Mila toggled her calm. Ken, they're pushing through. We can't hold this line. If you've got a miracle, now's the time. Deep beneath her, Alara Ken stood before the spear's core. The control nexus a storm of readouts and warning glyphs. Idris Harlan struggled at a sister console, rerouting power through conduits that should have collapsed decades ago. Alara's hand hovered above the ignition trigger. One push and the spear would sing, but sing too early, and the Empire would scatter before it could matter. Fire too late, and they'd be ash alongside their hunters. Timing was survival. Timing was revenge. Hold another 3 minutes, Mila, Alara said, her voice like ice cracking. 3, and we break their teeth. Mila cursed under her breath. She flicked her gaze to her squad, bruised, bleeding, watching her with that same reckless trust that made humans dangerous. 3 more minutes, she barked, pulling a thermal charge from her belt. Lock sights. When they breached the tram, we showed them the old welcome. The youngest fighter beside her, a boy named Ren, who had never seen sunlight, cracked a grin that reminded Mila what they were fighting for. Above the tunnels, Varun Cell paced the command deck of his flagship, the Sovereign's Claw. The live feeds flickered around him, armored troopers advancing, flame units clearing breaches. Breach drones mapping subterranean arteries once thought unreachable. Lord Commander, his aide drone, mandibles clacking in mechanical rhythm. Surface scans show sudden power surges beneath primary ice shelf, non-standard signatures, possible munitions or reactors. Varun's eyes narrowed. He leaned over the holomap, a ghostly rendering of Earth's cracked crust and the deeper shadows beneath. They're not fleeing, he murmured. They're baiting us. He lifted his chin, golden eyes gleaming. Double the breach pace. I want Ken alive. Bring me the one who dares wake the dead. His words rippled through the breach squads. The tunnel shook harder as siege mechs pressed forward, their drills tearing through decades of frozen dirt and memories dot in the vault. Idris slammed his fist on a console. Sparks flew. They're burning out our conduits. Alara, we can't hold the grid much longer. The ice cores are bleeding power. Alara didn't flinch. She adjusted a dial that hadn't turned in 40 years. Her father's handwriting glowed faintly on the steel casing. A single word, resist. Then we burn the last of it, she said. We don't need forever, just enough. Idris stared at her, voice raw. You know what happens if the spear's chargeover feeds. Alara's eyes met his. There was nothing soft in them. No fear, no regret, just that ember that had carried their species through fire and frost alike. Then it's Earth's final heartbeat, she said, and the galaxy will hear it. In the tram tunnels, the breach mechs hit the barricade. Sparks rained down like molten snow. Mila clicked the charge's primer, counting under her breath as her squad braced for the push. A blast of plasma sheared through the tram's side, molten metal spraying the walls. Imperial troopers surged through the breach, towering, faceless, unstoppable, for a heartbeat. Time still. Mila met the black glass of the lead trooper's visor and smiled like a ghost refusing the grave. She pressed the trigger. The tunnel howled with fire. The tram erupted inward, the charge turning rust and metal into a storm of razors. The blast crushed the first wave, sent the next reeling, but more came, always more. Mila staggered back, ears ringing, ribs cracked. She felt strong arms pull. Her upright, Ren, eyes wide but steady. Commander Ken says fall back. He shouted over the echoes of the blast. Mila blinked the blood from her lashes, caught her breath, and nodded. Then fall we shall. She keyed her calm one last time. Ken, line's gone. You've got open sky. Far below, Alara Ken laid her palm on the spear's final switch. Idris whispered a prayer older than the Empire's oldest laws. Above them, the Imperial fleet closed ranks in low orbit, their dreadnoughts aligned for surface sterilization. They didn't know what they hovered over, a grave, yes, but not humanity's, a weapon. Alara's voice carried across every channel, hijacking Imperial frequencies, echoing in the helmets of every soldier crawling through the tunnels. "This is Earth," she said, her tone cold enough to freeze the blood in any conqueror's veins. "And you forgot what we keep buried." She pressed the switch dial far above. The crust split. The old satellite screamed a signal to the spear's core. The weapon's magnetic rails aligned with the iron veins running through Earth's mantle. The last of Earth's warmth, stolen from dead oceans and buried suns, surged upward in a single, blinding pulse dot in orbit. Varian Cell watched in disbelief as the ground cracked open, not with fire, but with a silent promise that Earth's final word would not be surrender, and for the first time, the Empire understood that the grave they stood on was not theirs to claim. The crust of Earth split open like a scar tearing through ice and ancient bones. From the deepest tunnels, the Helios spear roared awake, a single shard of humanity's final spite that rose through layers of steel, stone, and the frozen relics of cities long devoured by poisoned storms. Alara Ken stood at the vault's heart as the control room shuddered around her. Sparks danced across the consoles. Idris Harlan braced against the rising tremors, the skin at his throat flickering with the glow of the spear's pulse. Reflected in the thick glass walls dot above them, the shaft that once led to forgotten mining. Rigs now carried the spear's furious breath skyward, a pillar of light, molten metal, an electromagnetic fury that ripped through the ice shelf and clawed at the waiting fleet. Far above, in the Sovereign's claw, Lord Commander Varian Cell felt his dreadnought tremble under his boots. The holofeed before him bled static as orbital relays fried one after another. His golden eyes narrowed at the spreading beam that split the clouds. "Impossible," he hissed. "No world below us holds that much fire." His aide, the insectoid creature always so calm, clicked its mandibles in panicked stutters. "Lord Commander, the energy spike matches the ancient Terran weapons. Chronos, Helios, forbidden designs." Varian's armored hand closed around the creature's throat, silencing it forever. How did they hide this? He demanded to the cold void, but the void gave him no answers. He snapped to his comnet, barking orders that rippled through the fleet like thunder. Deploy full kinetic countermeasures. Evade polar orbits. Neutralize the source with precision. Strikes, now, but precision was no longer theirs to wield dot in the vault. Idris shouted over the roar of 1,000 turbines howling themselves to ruin. "Alara, the magnetic field's unstable. If it fractures the mantle..." Alara didn't flinch. She stared at the wall of readouts, watching as ancient protocols unfolded lines of code that no living engineer could have written. This was her mother's gift, her father's defiance. Humanity's answer to a galaxy that forgot what Earth used to be, a cradle, a grave, and, when cornered, an executioner. "We're not shattering the world, Idris," she said, voice raw with the smoke and static. "We're reminding them we could." A new signal flickered across the consoles, coordinates aligning, orbit, trajectories calculated, weak points in the Imperial blockade marked by orbital debris and half-dead satellites. They left behind after the Luna massacre. The spear's pulse found them all. On the surface, Malavos and what remained of her. Squads stumbled out of the collapsing tunnels just in time to see the sky above them split with light. They fell to their knees on the fractured ice, breathless under the aurora that danced around the spear's ascending fury. Ren leaned close, eyes wide. "Did we do that?" he whispered. Mila touched his helmet, her laugh broken and alive. "No. KID Earth did that. In orbit. The first dreadnought caught in the spear's targeting lattice didn't stand a chance. A sliver of the beam lanced upward, an impossible railgun. Its payload a fragment of molten iron accelerated to a fraction of light speed. It punched through the dreadnought's spine. Like a needle through silk, Varian's eyes widened as he watched his flagship sister ship, the Empress Wraith, split in half, a silent scream as atmosphere and fire spilled into the void. But Alara Ken was not done. Back in the vault, Idris leaned in close, voice a snarl of disbelief and dread. "We could stop now. They'd flee. They'd never come back. The spear's done enough, Alara." Alara's eyes stayed locked on the main feed, where the remaining fleet shifted formation. fear and disbelief seeping into the cold patterns of their battle grid. No. She breathed. They'd come again. One day. Maybe not for us, but for whoever comes next. They need to remember. She keyed the final override. The spear's pulse grew sharper. Not just a beam, but a song. Ancient kill code stitched into the magnetic surge, broadcasting through frequencies older than the Empire itself. It sang into the enemy's command net, scrambled orbital relays, cooked drones mid-flight, blinded targeting a raised dot in the Sovereign's claw. Veruncell ripped his helmet free as his own visor turned to static. His bridge crew howled in panic. As control consoles exploded in sparks, he roared into the chaos. This is a bluff. She will not shatter her own cradle. The cost, but Earth had paid its cost long ago. On the broken surface, Malavos turned to her squad. Their roar reflected in her tear-soaked eyes. She saw the spear's energy scatter through the frozen sky like a dying sun being born again. What's happening? Commander, Mala called through the open channel. Elara's voice crackled back, soft, ironclad, a whisper of every ancestor who ever dreamed that Earth would stand free. We show them what it means to stand on human soil. Elara said, no more empires. Not above this sky. Deep in the vault, Idris lowered his head. A tired old man who had outlived too many wars, and he smiled as tears cut through the grime on his cheeks. God forgive us, he murmured, even as he reached for the auxiliary power lines to feed the spear its final meal. Above, the Imperial fleet writhed in panic. Ships collided trying to break orbit. Escape vectors shattered by the electromagnetic maelstrom that turned precision to chaos. And Earth, long thought silent, long thought dead, bared its teeth one last time. The night above Earth was no longer dark. It burned with ribbons of searing blue, emerald, and ghost-white fire. The Helios spear's song bleeding through the frozen sky like the cry of a giant waking from centuries of restless sleep. The Imperial fleet, once the Empire's proud blade, now drifted like prey caught in a sudden riptide. Their formation shattered by a weapon they never believed possible. By humans they dismissed as ghosts clinging to a grave. Inside the Sovereign's claw, Lord Commander Veruncell staggered through the smoke-choked bridge, armored boots crunching glass and molten circuits. The deck trembled under orbital collisions that slammed dreadnoughts into one another, each collision tearing new wounds in the fleet's pride. He shoved aside the corpse of his slain aide. The creature's mandibles frozen mid-scream. Sparks danced off Veruin's pauldrons as he roared at the bridge crew. Those few who still clung to failing consoles, reroute propulsion, pull us out of polar orbit. A terrified comms officer squealed, hands flickering across half-dead screens. Sire, the polar magnetics are surging. Our reactors, they're blind. Veruin struck him aside. The man crumpling like a discarded uniform. Rage turned his eyes molten gold. This was a tomb world. They were nothing, how, but the how didn't matter. Below him, the crust shuddered with fresh ruptures as the spear's pulse poured raw energy into magnetic veins. That twisted the sky into a shifting storm of lights and static. And at the heart of that storm, Elara Ken stood and MOVING. Inside the vault, alarm screamed, a hurricane of warnings that Idris Harlan couldn't silence even if he wanted to. Sparks fell like electric rain from the overhead conduits. Smoke curled around them, turning the control chamber into a ghostly cathedral of ruin and light. Idris coughed blood into his fist. He pressed it against his coat and smiled through the copper taste. Elara, we pushed the spear past protocol. The containment vanes will rupture soon. We've got maybe 20 minutes before the core burns out. Elara didn't look at him. Her eyes were fixed on the flickering feeds, broken orbital trajectories. Frantic Imperial comms choked with fear. She saw Veruin's flagship spinning. To realign, pulling back from the maelstrom's teeth. They're falling back. Idris's voice was half wonder, half dread. They're afraid. Not afraid enough, Elara said. Her fingers danced across the ancient brass controls, tracing lines her mother once taught her in secret. When she was just a child hiding in the old metro beneath Nova Key YV, she toggled the broadcast net, patching into every resistance comm, every surviving orbital drone, every soldier clutching a makeshift rifle in a cracked tunnel. Her voice, hoarse but unbroken, spilled into the ears of Malavos as she crouched behind a fractured ice ridge, her squad staring at the impossible. Lights overhead. To all cells, this is Commander Ken. The spear is awake. The fleet is breaking orbit. But they'll return if we let them. They'll regroup. They'll glass us from far enough that we'll never lift a stone in answer. Mila lifted her visor. Frost crusted on her lashes. What do we do? Commander, Elara's breath hitched. Only for a moment. Then her voice hardened into the same steel her ancestors bled for. We drive the blade deeper, she said. One final push, all cells. Converge on the old Oopling towers. Feed them power. Burn every reserve. The spear can't hold on its own, but Earth can lend it her last breath. Idris stared at her, realization dawning like an old nightmare remembered too late. Elara, if you bridge the Ooplings, she met his eyes. That tired smile barely breaking through the ash and sweat. It won't just be the spear singing, she said. It'll be Earth herself. Idris's hand shook as he keyed auxiliary commands, patching into the ancient geothermal rigs that dotted the ice shelf, relics that once powered cities no one remembered dot above them. The orbital relays flickered alive, old beacons whispering to the storm. Like veins rekindled with blood, the power grid roared back to life across the dead cities, feeding their final warmth to the monster beneath their feet. Outside the vault, the resistance fighters obeyed without hesitation. Mila and her battered squad surged toward the fractured Oopling towers half buried in snow. They tore open rusted panels, rerouted dying batteries, and fed old cables with stolen reactor cores carried from broken mining crawlers. Children, elders, engineers, they joined them too, human shadows moving through the howling ice to throw one last ember into the storm. On the bridge of the Sovereign's Claw, Varun watched in disbelief as the energy signatures tripled, the magnetic web pulling his fleet tighter into a noose of their own making. A tremor of fear, alien to him, crawled up his spine. Pulled back, full thrusters, slingshot to lunar shadow. But his dreadnought's thrusters coughed plasma into the magnetic storm. Like a fish trying to swim against a riptide, the spear's pulse dragged at his ships, pinning them to orbital corridors that twisted under Earth's final defiance. In the vault, Idris turned to Elara, voice cracked raw. Once you bridge the grid, we can't shut it down. You know that. Elara looked at him, tired, her eyes rimmed with firelight, but unbowed. We were never meant to shut it down, she whispered. She placed her palm on the core's ignition one last time. The hum of the spear deepened, a rumble that spoke of buried wrath. Above them, the Imperial fleet clawed against gravity in magnetic rage, engines screaming, hulls groaning as the orbital plane pulled tighter and tighter. In the dying corridors of the Oopling towers, Mila Voss keyed her final override, power lines surging with stolen sunfire. Do it, Commander, she whispered, her voice swallowed by the wind. Show them our name. Deep beneath the ice, Elara King closed her eyes and pressed the final switch. The spear drank from the world's bones and roared into the heavens. Above the battered cradle of Earth, the heavens became a forge. The Helios spear, once a sleeping relic, now roared its final defiance into the black, a pillar of burning magnetics and iron plasma, piercing the void like a lance hurled by the bones of old titans. The Imperial fleet, once the most disciplined blade of the Empress's will, drifted in tangled ruin. Dreadnoughts collided as the storm of electromagnetic rage scrambled their thrusters, turned precision into chaos. Gilded hulls designed to conquer entire star systems twisted helplessly. In Earth's iron grip in the vault, Idris Harlan staggered against a buckled wall, heat scalding his face. The command nexus flickered and died in sections as the Ooplings reached overload, feeding the spear with more than it was ever built to contain. He turned to Elara Ken, who still stood before the main console like a sentinel forged from grief and iron. Her coat was scorched. Blood trickled from her temple. She never flinched. Elara, Idris shouted over the hurricane of failing turbines. This is it. If we don't disengage now, the core breach. She turned to him, and for a heartbeat, he saw the young girl she once was, watching the last Soul Guard battalion abandon the skies of Luna, clinging to her mother's hand, eyes burning with the promise that they would never bow again. There is no disengage, she said, voice soft but stronger than the storm. We finish this. Above, on the frozen surface, Mila Voss clung to the fractured base of an Oopling tower as its steel ribs glowed molten. With the power surging through it, Ren, the boy soldier, tried to drag her away. Captain, the feed's blowing. The whole tower's gonna. She shook him off, her grin wild through cracked lips. Good, let it. They wanted our home. Let it swallow them. The Oopling detonated in a blossom of blue-white light, Feeding the spear surged one final burst of Earth's buried warmth. Beneath the crust, seismic veins cracked like glass. Molten iron screamed up the spear's channel, flaring out as a second, wider beam that tore free of the atmosphere and lashed the fleet. On the bridge of the Sovereign's Claw, Lord Commander Varun Sel stood unbowed as the decks pitched under. His boots, flames danced along shattered conduits. His officers lay scattered like broken dolls. Through a flickering viewport, he saw it all. The fleet dragged into the storm's throat, dreadnoughts colliding as magnetic pulses sheared hull plating. Like paper, the oppressor's wrath, once the pride of the Outer Rim sieges, slammed into an orbital foundry station, both igniting in a silent sunburst that lit the low orbit like dawn. A junior weapons tech, blood streaming from his eyes, crawled to Varun's feet, whispering broken pleas. The Lord Commander drew his blade, ceremonial, layered with sigils of House Cell, and drove it through the man's throat without even looking down. No retreat, Varun whispered to the dying man, to himself, to the stars that no longer answered his call. No surrender. If I burn a legend. He stumbled to the main command throne, slamming his armored fist onto the last functioning relay. Target the source, he growled to no one and everyone. Target Earth's heart. Bring the orbital lances to bear. I will salt this graveyard. Myself, in the vault, Idris saw the orbital kill lances flicker alive on the tactical redouts. Imperial spears primed to strike the spear's source with concentrated orbital fire. He lunged to the console, fingers flying over melted keys. Alara, they're gonna break through. They'll glass the whole vault. The mantle, she didn't answer. Her eyes were locked on the feed, the last view of Earth's sky, now ablaze with the aurora of her people's final stand. She reached for the last override, the one her mother built and her father buried in the code like a seed. Waiting for the frost to crack, a final key turned. A whisper escaped her lips. Never kneel. Outside the vault, the spear pulsed one last time, not as a beam, but as a shattering wave. The entire magnetic grid, the dying power lines of the old world, the hidden geothermal veins, all released in a single catastrophic bloom. The orbital kill lances never fired. Their capacitors cooked inside their launch cradles, each lance exploding like glass crushed by a hammer. Chain reactions rippled through the remaining dreadnoughts, igniting fuel cores not built for such wild, hungry storms. Malavos, clinging to her half-destroyed tower, saw it happen. A sun blooming where the fleet once loomed. Do you see it, Ren? She whispered as the shockwave washed over them. That's us. That's Earth. The Sovereign's claw fractured from bow to stern. Varun Sel watched the vault's final rage reflected in the cracking glass of his command throne. He bared his teeth in a predator's grin, unblinking as the fire swallowed him. Deep underground, Alara Kent stood as the spear's pulse washed through the vault. Idris reached for her, but she stayed rooted, her eyes locked on the ceiling as it cracked apart. No fear, no regret, only that final iron whisper. Now they remember who we are, above Earth. The Imperial fleet, the blade that once cut. 1,000 worlds into silence, turned to drifting embers in orbit, and from the ashes of the old grave, the galaxy learned that this cradle would never bow again. Dawn came late to the shattered bones of Earth. It crept across the scorched ice shelf in hushed waves of pale gold, turning molten craters into steaming lakes, and shattered ooplinks into glittering spears of frost. Where once the Imperial fleets, shadow had darkened the sky, there remained only drifting wreckage, burnt hulls, frozen shards of armor, flickers of dying engines spinning soundlessly through the dawn's thin breath. In the ruins of the oopling towers, Malavos opened her eyes to light and silence. She lay half buried beneath the warped metal ribs of the tower's husk. The boy, Ren, was there, his small hand pressed against her back, his face smeared with ash and blood. When she coughed, he stirred, and a grin cracked the crusted frost. At the corners of his lips, Captain, he rasped, voice so small it might have been a ghost sigh. Is it over? Mila pushed herself upright, wincing as her ribs protested. She looked up, past the twisted spires of dead metal, past the drifting, falling embers of the once mighty dreadnoughts. She saw the sky clear, open, and possibly vast, and she laughed. It was ragged, broken, too loud for the hush of this new dawn, but it was alive. Yeah, kid, she said, voice hoarse with disbelief and raw pride. It's over. Look at it. Look at us. Above her, drifting debris glowed like dying stars. Proof that Earth's grave was never empty. Proof that when pushed to the edge, humanity never waited to be buried deep below the ice. Where the spear's core had once hummed like a caged sun, only silence remained. The vault lay fractured, walls collapsed, conduits split wide like veins bled dry, steam coiled in the ruin, rising from cracks that bled the last warmth of a world that had given everything to keep its name from being forgotten. Idris Harlan sat against the shattered main console, a broken wire wrapped like a serpent around his legs. The flicker of his breathing misted the frozen air. His battered eyes searched the ruin for the one figure he still hoped to see standing. There she was, Elara Khan, still a pride among the fallen girders and dead terminals. Her eyes were closed now, lashes dusted with frost. She had not fled. She had not bowed. She had given Earth her last fire and asked for nothing back but memory. Idris managed a weary smile, tears freezing on his cheeks. "They'll know," he whispered to the broken consoles. "They'll know your name, above ground." The survivors came blinking into the light, old men with patched rifles, children with raw hands from carrying battery cores, mothers hood, sworn never to hold a gun again, but had held the line anyway. They stood among the wreckage and falling ash, staring up at the sky that no longer held Imperial banners, only drifting sparks that would burn out long before they touched the ground. From Mila's side, a battered transmitter sparked back to life. Static bled through, then a dozen voices. All at once, scattered resistance cells from across the old cities, mountain enclaves, tunnel dwellers who had thought themselves alone, until they heard Earth's final roar. "Sector 3, we held the tunnels. Command, this is the oceanic hold. We see clear skies, no ships left. Is it true? Did we do it? Did she do it?" Mila pressed the transmitter to her chest, eyes locked on the clear horizon. She keyed it open, voice steady despite the quake in her bones. "This is Captain Mila Voss. Elara Khan has fallen, but her fire holds the sky. The fleet is gone. Earth stands. We stand." Silence greeted her, then a flood of voices, some weeping, some laughing, some too shocked to do either, across the broken globe. Those who had hidden underground for decades crawled into a dawn they had never dared dream would come. Among the wreckage of the Imperial fleet, drifting salvage, ships, old resistance scavengers, prowled the orbital graveyard. They picked the shattered hulls for any technology worth claiming, and as they moved among the dead giants, they broadcast one simple message, bouncing it from ship to ship, debris to debris, until it found the void beyond Sol's rim. "Earth stands. We remember. Come test us again, and remember this day, far away, in the distant seats of the Empire's throne worlds." The echoes of that message rippled outward. Bureaucrats froze mid-council. Generals glanced at old maps, their trembling fingers brushing over that pale blue dot they had once called Concord. And somewhere, deep in the marrow of their golden halls, they realized that no matter how many fleets they built, no matter how many worlds they chained, there would always be one truth beneath their boots. Humanity kneels for no empire. On the ice shelf, as the sun climbed higher, Mila Voss rose to her feet, her hand tied around Ren's. Around them, more survivors gathered, grim, grinning, bloody ghosts refusing to fade. One by one, they faced the sky, clear, boundless, brimming with tomorrow. And in that silence, as the last embers of the Imperial fleet fell like shooting stars over a world once left for dead, a single truth burned brighter than the dawn. That day, the galaxy learned what it means to be human.